Seriously, every time I do research and write a script that concerns the medieval or early modern period, I am so fortunate at how the English language has become modernized and standardized. Good Lord. Welcome to A Popular History of Unpopular Things, a podcast that covers the unpopular stories from history. Tales about disease, death, and destruction. I like learning about all things bloody, gross, mysterious, and weird. Today, let's talk about the mysterious Voynich Manuscript. But before we begin, a quick shout out to a few of my old students who I know still voluntarily listen to me enthuse about history, which is wild. You are no longer socially obligated to do so, so it warms my heart to know that you choose to do it. So hi to Matthew C. from Period 7 World History in that really awfully cramped room we had, 134, had like way too many desks in it. I still hope you're baking delicious cookies. I'm glad that you still love history. And hello to Tyrese from Period 9 in my actual classroom. It's cool that I still see you around town every so often, usually at Target, I feel like. And hey, if any of my other students are still out there listening, let me know. I'll give you a shout out too. Back to the show. So in 1912, a book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich was rooting around in a treasure box owned by monks. They needed money, and Voynich was willing to pay for any valuable items that he found. The box itself was covered in cobwebs, unobtrusive, but inside, Voynich found the manuscript. The monks had no problem parting with it. After all, it was just a random collection of old documents, and they needed the money. So, he purchased the manuscript, and it's from him, of course, that we get its name, the Voynich Manuscript. It's a colorfully illustrated book written in an unknown language that dates back to the early 15th century. That's the 1400s. Analysis of the handwriting places it potentially in Italy during the Renaissance, though to be perfectly honest, we still really don't know much about it. We don't know its origins, who wrote it, why they wrote it, what it even says, or what it's about. It's a complete and total mystery. The first documented owner that we know of was George Beresch, a 17th century alchemist from Prague in today's Czechia. But Beresch wasn't actually the first owner. René Zandbergen, in an essay on the Voynich manuscript's earliest owners, tells us that multispectral imaging on the first page reveals the signature of a Jacobus Sinapius. And that signature faded over time, but it's there, which tells us that there were definitely owners before George Beresch and probably even before Jacobus. Other known owners include a Holy Roman Emperor, physicians, Jesuit scholars, authors, and more. And today it's on display in the Yale University Beinecke Library, gifted to the university by a book dealer named Hans Peter Krauss in 1969. Over the years, scholars and code breakers have tried to figure it out. Is it a code? Is the whole thing a cipher? Is it a reference work? Is it a work of fiction? Is it just a hoax? We know from carbon dating that it is indeed a document from the early 1400s, so it wasn't completely made up. Some people thought that maybe Voynich made it up to get attention. No, it is an old document. But what is its purpose? And why have we still not figured it out? Now, I'm certainly not going to crack the code myself, but in today's episode, I want to explore the mystery of the manuscript. For those of you who already know about this topic, you probably won't learn anything new today. Today's episode is just a simple history. It's not a reimagining. I'm not presenting any new theses to explore, but perhaps what's in the Voynich manuscript isn't as important as its context. How has this document cemented itself in our history, and what does it mean for us as human beings that we still can't figure out what it means? So let's get started. So first, I want to go over the manuscript itself. What is so mysterious about this thing, and why? The Voynich Manuscript is, as I've mentioned, an old book from the early Renaissance period, the early 1400s. It's about 240 pages, bound together into one book. though some of those pages are missing. And other pages actually are longer vellum sheets that fold out. We call them folios, some of which expand to 4, 6, 8, or 12 pages. Vellum is a type of parchment made from animal skins. It's typically smoother and doesn't yellow like traditional parchment does over time. It also doesn't rip as easily. The vellum sheets in the Voynich Manuscript are made from calf skin. The text is written from left to right in an unknown script, accompanied by lots of colorful illustrations. I had to flip through each page of it myself. Digitally, though. You can find the scanned images in Yale's digital collections online. I put a link in the podcast description so you can check it out for yourself. There are all kinds of flowers and plants depicted, many of them recognizable Mediterranean species. But some of the flowers in there are fictional, or perhaps artistic combinations, a combination of stylistic versions of real plants. And these botanical illustrations carry on for about the first half of the book. Beginning in the second half of the book are illustrations that look like various charts, for lack of a better word. They look vaguely astronomical, lots of circles with figures depicted inside. Some are clearer than others. Like, for example, there are clear depictions of the sun and the moon and the stars. There are also some zodiac figures, including my own, Pisces, so shout out to my fellow fish out there. Now, these astrological and astronomical diagrams go on for roughly 20 pages, and then there are doodles of humans in various positions and also various states of undress, doing random things mixed in and around the text. Some are drawn in a field, some are farming, some are in water, etc. And then it's back to botanical images for a bit before the manuscript is virtually just text. Now, the text that accompanies all of these images, botanical, astrological, astronomical, human, accompanying this are, how do you even explain it? It's a completely made up language. It's completely made, it's not like it's written in a cursive that's hard to read. It is completely made up. And historians and scholars have commonly referred to it as Voynichese. Listen, it's not like a lost language we can't identify before. This isn't a Rosetta Stone situation where we just haven't uncovered the way to what's the word? We haven't come up with a way to translate, right? Like, no, it's not that. This is a language that has never been seen before. And we've not found anything else like it in the world. At all. I read one fun description that said, very quick quote, "It is almost as if the Voynich Manuscript had been yanked from some unknown realm and dropped here on Earth." End quote. But before you start thinking that maybe this was left behind by some visiting aliens and that Stargate was right the whole time, the top corners of each right-hand page are numbered in our traditional Arabic numeral system that everyone on Earth uses today, right? So page 1, 2, 3, 4. Though the notation is a bit different from modern notation, each spread is considered one page instead of two. So if you open up the book, both the left and right side pages would be considered the same page in the manuscript. And though we have no idea what it says, or what some of these images even depict, one thing is for sure, it is definitely some kind of technical document. It's not like the flowers are random or decorative. Clearly, the information on each page is describing the flower, is describing the astronomical chart, is describing human action. So, in some way, this is a technical document. George Barash, the first confirmed owner of the book, was also confused about its purpose. He wrote a letter to a Jesuit scholar named Athanasius Kircher in Rome, asking him to look over some sample copies of the manuscripts that he sent. Kircher was intrigued and wanted to purchase the book, but Barash wouldn't sell it to him. When Barash passed, the book went to a friend named Jan Marek Marzi, who later bequeathed it to Kircher. And the reason I'm saying all this is because alongside this gift was a letter. And when Voynich bought the manuscript from the monks in 1912, that very same letter was still attached to it. It was written in Latin and dated August 19th, 6065. I've also seen 6066, and it's a pretty fascinating read. It's written by Marzi to Kircher, and the text of the letter is as follows, quote, "Reverend and distinguished Sir, Father in Christ, this book, bequeathed to me by an intimate friend, I destined for you, my very dear Athanasius Kircher, as soon as it came into my possession, for I was convinced that it could be read by no one except yourself. The former owner of this book asked your opinion by letter, copying and sending you a portion of the book from which he believed you would be able to read the remainder, but he at that time refused to send the book itself. To its deciphering, he devoted unflagging toil, as is apparent from attempts of his which I send you herewith, and he relinquished hope only with his life. But his toil was in vain, for such sphinxes as these obey no one but their master, Kircher. Accept now this token, such as it is, and long overdue though it be, of my affection for you, and burst through its bars, if there are any, with your wonted success. Dr. Raphael, a tutor in the Bohemian language to Ferdinand III, then King of Bohemia, told me that the said book belonged to the Emperor Rudolph. He believed the author was Roger Bacon, the Englishman. On this point I suspend judgment. It is your place to define for us what view we should take thereon, to whose favor and kindness I unreservedly commit myself and remain. At the command of your reverence, Johann Marcus Marzi of Prague, 19th August 1665 or 1666. End quote. How fascinating. So, what did we learn from this letter? Well, the Holy Roman Emperor and King of Bohemia, Emperor Rudolph II, once owned this manuscript as well, so that's cool. And we also have a guess at the original author, the Englishman Roger Bacon. Not to be confused with Francis Bacon, who was known for developing the scientific method. No known relation there either, except that they were both men of science and inquiry. So, who is Roger Bacon, and is there any merit to this claim that he was the original author? Roger Bacon was a medieval scholar who studied math, philosophy, the sciences, as they were back in the medieval period, and theology. He, like the scientific revolution geniuses who came after him, emphasized empiricism, the idea that knowledge comes from observation and experimentation. Now, Marzi believes that Roger Bacon was the author, or at least he's just parroting the suspicions of previous owners of the manuscript. So is there any evidence to suggest this is true? No, not really. At the time, all they had was speculation. I mean, that's all we have now, too, right? And Roger Bacon was as good a guess as any. I mean, he had this reputation as a magician and a polymath, and he was interested in nature. So, perhaps this strange book with horticultural doodles and weird astronomical diagrams and naked bodies was his work? He must have had the reputation of a man who might produce something like this if someone believed it was his doing. And in the early 20th century, Wilfrid Voynich, the man who rediscovered the manuscript and brought it into the limelight, also claimed that Roger Bacon was the author. Now, Voynich claimed, interestingly enough, that he himself had deciphered parts of this book, this undecipherable book, with a made-up language. Nobody else in history could figure it out, but the bookseller Voynich did, apparently, and what he deciphered, apparently, proved that Roger Bacon had access to a telescope and a microscope, which he used to scribble tiny shorthand symbols in the book, and that's why Voynich knew it was Roger Bacon. Okay, well, a few problems with his basic argument. 1. Microscopes were invented in the 16th century, the earliest and simplest ones dating back to 1590. 2. Telescopes were invented in the 17th century, the first in the Netherlands in 1608. 3. Roger Bacon died in 1292. So unless Roger Bacon is also a time traveler, there's no way he could have written the Voynich manuscript. And later, don't forget, we used carbon dating to prove that the manuscript came from the early 1400s. And again, Roger Bacon died in 1292. Okay, so Roger Bacon, definitely out. Who else have we got? There's another theory out there that the manuscript was an elaborate hoax perpetuated by John Dee, the court astrologer to Queen Elizabeth I, in conjunction with his associate, a medium named Edward Kelli. Good last name. So, who is John Dee, spelled D-E-E? John Dee was a mathematician, astrologer, and alchemist who, like I said, worked in Elizabeth's court. He lived between 1527 and 1608, So, knowing what we know about the manuscript's age based on carbon dating, he already does not work out as its author. But let's roll with it anyway and see what we can come up with. It was our friend Wilfred Voynich who suggested that John Dee might have owned the manuscript, perhaps the one who sold it to Emperor Rudolf. There's no written evidence proving that, though, no bill of sale, no pattern of frequent contact between the two, but John Dee did own another cipher book called the Book of Soiga, so there's that. I guess he liked cipher books, so maybe Voynich too? So why do people then think that John Dee wrote it, if I'm talking about whether or not he owned it? Well, for one, Emperor Rudolf apparently patroned various occultists, and John Dee was something of an occultist himself. According to the Czech Center Museum in Houston, quote, Rudolf II focused on the pursuit of knowledge and used his influence to draw in artists and scientists from across Europe. More specifically, he was interested in the study of alchemy, an ancient form of natural philosophy. The ultimate aim of alchemy was to create the philosopher's stone, which has the ability to turn base metals into gold and is said to grant eternal youth. His reign overlapped with the scientific revolution, and even though alchemy may seem more aligned with the occult, it was practiced by some of the most renowned scientists of the time. Some of the most notable people who were supported by the emperor include Johann Kepler, who developed the 3 laws of planetary motion, John Dee, a famous mathematician and astronomer, and Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe. With the help of Rudolf's power and funds, these men were able to pursue their research. End quote. But that connection between the Voynich Manuscript owner, Emperor Rudolf II, and John Dee is not enough evidence to point to John Dee as the author, or even someone who came across the book. So, what else have we got? Well, there's also hearsay evidence about John Dee's son, Arthur Dee, who was also an alchemist, and who later served as court physician to both Tsar Michael I of Russia and King Charles I of England. Okay, there's lots of names here. There was a letter written in 1675 from a Sir Thomas Browne to a man named Elias Ashmole. And in this letter, Browne says that Arthur told him that Arthur's father had, quote, a book containing nothing but hieroglyphics, which book his father bestowed much time upon, but I could not hear that he could make it out. End quote. Seriously, every time I do research and write a script that concerns the medieval or early modern period, I am so fortunate at how the English language has become modernized and standardized. Good Lord. But anyways, according to this quoted conversation from a third party, John Dee might have had a book written in mysterious symbols that he couldn't figure out. But that's not evidence that would hold up in court, right? That would be like me telling my best friend Emily something I heard about an old coworker, which is then to be assumed as fact for all of history. It's nonsensical. And Browne telling his friend Ashmole about a conversation he had with the younger Dee is certainly not enough to convince me that the older John Dee had much to do with the manuscript, if anything. And there have been other claims over the years. Some think it was a Raphael Miniszewski, a friend of Jan Marzi who was a cryptographer, and claimed to invent an uncrackable cipher. And the idea there is that perhaps the manuscript was that cipher. Another guess came from Nick Pelling in his 2006 book, The Curse of the Voynich. He theorized that it was written by a 15th century northern Italian architect named Antonio Averlino. Why? Well, there were some noted similarities in Averlino's architectural drawings and castles depicted in the manuscript. The carbon dating fits. The location works. It's certainly possible. Is there definitive evidence otherwise? No, there's not. But it's an interesting theory. And honestly, the Voynich manuscript has been read cover to cover, back to front, upside down, right side up, sideways, long ways, any kind of ways you can think of. We've pored over it by eye and by machine, and if there was definitive proof somewhere in or on those pages, we would have found it by now. The honest, unsatisfying truth is that we just don't know who wrote it, and anyone who claims they know is just speculating. I personally enjoy reading all the Reddit theories about it, but that's just it. They're just theories. History theories. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. So the more realistic answers to the riddle of who wrote this manuscript are, in no particular order: 1, it was made by someone anonymously, or perhaps someone whose name is just lost to the historical record. 2, it was made by somebody that we know of, but we've lost the documentation and evidence of that. 3, it was a hoax. Not necessarily to harm anyone, maybe just as a fun art project prank, or maybe to poke fun at a cryptographer friend, who knows. 4, aliens. 5, it's actually just a Daedric artifact filled with forbidden knowledge, maybe one of Hermaeus Mora's black books. And if you got that reference, you are contractually obligated to like and follow my podcast. I don't make the rules up. And finally, 6, the book comes from an alternate timeline with different written languages, and it somehow no-clipped into the back rooms of our universe, and then ended up with the Jesuits, Emperor, book collectors, and now Yale. Take your pick. I'm enjoying the ramifications of that last one myself. Thanks for joining me for this episode of A Popular History of Unpopular Things. My name is Kelli Beard, and I hope you've enjoyed this short episode on the Voynich Manuscript. Thank you for tuning into my podcast, and check out some of the other episodes if you want more. If you want to support the show, I've got a link in the description for Buy Me a Coffee, a site where fans can fund small creators like me without having to sign up for a whole account. I would of course appreciate any help you can give me, but honestly, I just appreciate that you listen to me talk about cool history stuff. Be sure to like and follow my podcast, available wherever you listen, so you know when new episodes are dropped. And stay tuned to get a popular history of unpopular things.